EM Weekly is starting right now.
In exercise, there has to be some level of discovery. And discovery is one of those nice words that gets us away from test and gets us away from testing folks and probably lightens that anxiety a little bit, because who doesn't want to discover something about themselves?
Hey, welcome to EM Weekly. This is your host, Todd DeVoe speaking, and it's a beautiful, cool day here in Southern California. And I know that the rest of the parts of the country are getting snow. And believe it or not, we had a snow warning come out here for Los Angeles County. Of course, it's in the higher elevations, not down in the lowlands where this guy lives, but still, it's kind of cool to see a snow warning for LA County. For those of you that don't see that, I'm from back east, and so it kind of made me chuckle just a little bit. Got some people talking, so that's a good news because, with the drought and everything that comes around here, and hopefully if we do get snow and it's able to get some snowpack, as we call it, we'll be able to avoid another drought coming up here, so let's hope for that. Today we're going to be talking about training and exercises and improving your outcome with expert trainer Todd Mans and the Blue Cell Company. Now, I'm excited to announce that the Blue Cell Company is one of our new sponsors for EM Weekly. We are really happy that this has happened with Todd and his company, the Blue Cell. We're going to talk a little bit about training with him. So training was one of the top 3 topics on our poll of what do you want to hear about in 2018 that we took in December. And so I started searching for a good training company, and I came across the Blue Cell, reached out to Todd to ask him if he'd want to come on the show. And then he decided he would like to advertise with us. So this is a new relationship. So again, I'm excited if you guys can go to the website and say hi and just say that you heard it from here, from EM Weekly. That would be great. And just to let him know what you guys think about his episode here too. So that's exciting. A couple reasons why we chose to go with the Blue Cell. And one of the things I want to say is I am dedicated to you guys that I will not bring companies or products onto EM Weekly that I haven't looked at or tested or got highly recommended for and spoken to the owners to see how this fits in with EM Weekly. Again, we're here to bring quality to you guys, so that's just my dedication to you. And there's 3 reasons why I think that Blue Cell fit that mark. One is, come on, the guy's name is Todd. You cannot go wrong with a guy named Todd, right? That being said, that's one of the reasons. 2, his company is veteran owned. Todd is a former Marine. He's also a former police officer, and he worked as an emergency manager in Colorado. So he has the experience to back up what he's talking about. And 3, I got some feedback from people who used them, took a look at some of the reviews about the Blue Cell, and it was amazing the amount of enthusiastic recommendations that came along with for the Blue Cell. Things going on around the world. Saturday morning, we learned that the government shut down, and what does that mean? That means that they're going to stop spending money on certain aspects. I see the government shutdown impacting areas such as Puerto Rico, Houston, the burn areas in Northern California and Central California on the recovery side. It's not going to really impact the states at this point of how that looks or your local government, but for sure there's going to be some impact regarding the shutdown. So what's that mean for us? That means that we're going to have to really keep the track of our paperwork, what's going on with it, and it's going to probably delay in monies getting back to those local jurisdictions. So keep that in mind as you're doing your work out there. Those of you that are impacted by this area, keep your heads up and understand that it's not the men and women of FEMA that this is happening through. This is our politicians that have made this happen. So I'm with you guys, and if there's anything that we can do to help, please let us know. There was a 6.3 earthquake in Mexico, and there were rumors quickly that there were tsunamis that were going on, and that proven to be false information that went out there. But it kind of highlights the concept of what do we have to do rumor control, via the internet, the social media. One of the guys came into my office when this earthquake went down, said that there's video of tsunami in Mexico, pretty bad. It's on Facebook, and we couldn't verify it. And then he came over later, and as we're looking for it, and he goes, "No, it's false. It was chosen to be a bunk video." Again, he's a 30-some-odd year veteran of emergency response, so it's all of us can get hooked up into seeing that and believing in it. So we really have to do a good job as emergency managers to vet this information through good sources, through proper channels and good sources, right? Don't take, just any source as far as what it is. Vet it. One of the things that we try to do before I post anything up on our Facebook and also Twitter and like I said, social media, and including our website, is we try to vet it first before we post it. If I can't get a couple different sources that are saying the same thing, I'm not gonna post it. But still, if you guys ever see anything posted that looks hinky to us, please let us know right away. Again, we're sourcing these things. We can get caught, in the moment as well. So feel free to reach out to us and say, hey, this isn't quite factual. You might want to check it, and here's some different sources for it. I would be happy. And again, we're building this community here. Normally, our stuff, we're not trying to break news. That's not what we're doing here. We're just trying to find a place where we can collate news and get it all together for you all to see, and different sources that are out there. So that's what our goal is. So yeah, that's what happens here during this last week. Let's listen to Todd Mans and the Blue Cell and take some ideas on how we can improve training. Todd, welcome to EM Weekly.
Hey, thanks. Thanks a lot for having me.
No problem. So Todd, tell me a little bit about yourself and then how you got into emergency management, and then you might as well go right into what Blue Cell is and how that product can help emergency managers across the country and the world.
Sure. I think as I travel around the country training, I always kind of ask that same question. And, for many of us, it was one of those things in the post 9/11 era. I thought I was maybe done in terms of working on the public safety side. I had already previously done that and had done some time in the Marine Corps, done some time as a police officer, and was actually in a completely different business, actually a shooting business in the late 90s. And part of that was working with firearm simulation and developing scenarios. And when 9/11 happened, there was a lot of training that popped up here in the Denver metro area. And I actually went to a ICS course to try to think about how to be a better exercise designer. Through that process, I ended up teaching a lot of incident command here in the Denver metro area, and met Fire Chief, who became a very good friend of mine. And he said, hey, I've got something you can help me with. That's how my emergency management career really began, very, very much part-time for a small fire district in Colorado. And that led into a lot of the things that I do today with regard to the consulting firm, the Blue Cell.
Tell me what Blue Cell is, how you guys got started, and what services that you guys offer.
So, literally in 2010, I was doing a lot of teaching really for the state, and that was starting to expand, and that teaching really encompassed incident command system training. Interestingly enough, 8 years later, that's still our bread and butter. But over that time span, I got invited to a neighboring state, and that turned into going to a couple of neighboring states. And the next thing I know, I'm literally teaching in about 15 states and formalize that process into today what is the Blue Cell and the Blue Cell companies. In 2012, we actually purchased Command School TTX out of Lancaster, PA. They had a great reputation going back really to the late 1980s, if you can believe that. And so through expansion, we just continued to add to that repertoire of what we did, got into a lot of the emergency management training, incident position-specific training, and even some hazmat training has dropped into our repertoire of what we do on the training side. The intent was to really be an exercise company, but we started out as a training company.
Right.
Exercise, though, in the last 4 years has really taken off for us, and it takes us into the product lines that we have today.
In your philosophy, just because you said that, what's the difference between really training and exercises?
It's kind of well documented, from certainly the official doctrines that are out there. But for me personally, training is that opportunity to try to understand what you're doing. And exercise is the opportunity to practice that and see if you're doing it right. Growing up in the Marine Corps, they have a very specific philosophy about those things. And interestingly enough, I probably still use a lot of those philosophies today. And so in the classroom setting, even with adult learning concept where we do need to do some hands-on to get the point across, it's not the same thing as exercise, because in exercise, that's kind of that opportunity to explore and probably make mistakes, the things that we learn from the most, obviously, being mistakes. And that's really the biggest difference that I see.
Right. I think that's one of the things that people forget too, is that when they go into doing exercises, that it is the practical application of what you learn basically in the classroom. You kind of made a point there of saying that during your exercise time that you learn more from your mistakes. And I see that sometimes people are afraid to allow their command staff to see a failure in exercises. And they tend to make them really vanilla and easy to go through and kind of boring, and you don't get much out of them. How do you get somebody through to an exercise to where they're actually learning something and making it a little bit more challenging for everybody in the system?
Well, I think the key for us, especially as a contract outfit, is to have that conversation up front with our customer. And I agree. I think the grant side of the way things are driven today sometimes kind of puts us in that situation where maybe the priority is not actually to make and see mistakes. I think there is a way to appropriately do that. And generally, what we do at the Blue Cell is we'll have that kind of frank conversation with our customer. And even though we might have a master scenario event list that we're following, that does not mean that we should not have the ability to deviate from that on exercise day to really see something specifically or get the outcome that we're looking for. Certainly in exercise, we should be testing a plan. And sometimes, of course, we don't have a plan. We do a lot of exercises along those lines. Mm-hmm. But I think in the end, if that environment is constructed and communicated appropriately, I've really not seen a lot of folks who get terribly upset if they know that the point of the exercise is to really try to see where our potential gaps and deficiencies are, and also to see what we're doing well and validate some things that we have previously put in place in terms of equipment and different plans and that type of thing.
The old adage is every plan doesn't survive first contact. And I think that when you do a proper exercise, that you get to see your plan in a controlled setting be challenged a little bit by that exercise. And I think that's as an emergency manager, I think that's an exciting time when we can really test, again, the plan. And whenever we do exercises, I always stress that we're not grading people or testing people. We're testing the plan, and we're testing what our concepts and ideas are. Do you agree with that, or am I off base?
No, I agree 100%. And I tell you, one of the buzzwords that we like to use internally, and we try to share it with our customers, is in exercise, there has to be some level of discovery. And discovery is one of those nice words that gets us away from test and gets us away from testing folks, and probably lightens that anxiety a little bit, because who doesn't want to discover something about themselves,
right,
their agency, their equipment, their plan, because the alternative is to discover it in the midst of the real thing.
Right.
And I tell you, that's not fair. That's simply not fair to the citizens who expect us to at least have some of these things figured out. So, when the alternative is to only do discovery in the real thing, and that can end very badly, it does make the idea of taking the opportunity and exercise for discovery a lot more palatable, I think.
What are the advantages of hiring a consultant firm like yours to come in and do an exercise than having the exercise designed and administered in-house?
Well, I think there's pros and cons, on both sides of that. And we've actually been in situations where we've talked customers out of hiring us because it does work and potentially can work for them to do it themselves, or maybe just to get a little bit of guidance. For us, we did about 65 exercises last year, to include 6 full scales in 18 different states. And so the advantage, if any, we can do things faster because we do it all the time. And we also can bring in ideas that are outside of that immediate circle of influence for a particular jurisdiction. We definitely try to share as many ideas as we can from one exercise to the next, including things that we learn along the way about how to do that better. So if anything, it probably does come down to when you bring in any consulting firm that's doing a high volume of work, they're just going to be a little bit faster at it and maybe have a few shortcuts and maybe have a few ideas that the local jurisdiction that's maybe doing a full scale every 3 years, just doesn't have that practice opportunity in exercise, the facilitation of the exercise itself.
One of the things I'm excited about when we do exercises, especially when we're doing large-scale ones like countywide and we have contractors and stuff come in, I love the idea of the collaboration that you can get from that because they're seeing it from the outside, not the inside. They're also, like a group like Blue Cell, you're bringing in all those other lessons that you've learned from the same mistakes, right, that you've learned that people have made across the country, and you can say, hey, look at this is what we learned from here as well. Try doing this a little bit differently, and I think it can come in with a wider eye, a broader perspective, and a fresh set of ideas that come into an area than somebody who's been working in the same location, in the same plan at the same time. The other thing, too, as a small agency, as the emergency manager, if you're creating the exercise, you can't really test yourself, meaning that your role in that event as well when you have somebody from the outside helping you create that program. And that's my take on it.
Yeah, we have a number of customers that specifically bring us in so that the emergency managers and those goal champions in that jurisdiction, medium and small jurisdictions, so that they get the opportunity to participate in the exercise and to participate in the exercise fairly without true insight as to exactly what's going to happen when and that type of thing. And so we kind of call that exercise support in some ways, and we have basically a team that can come in and provide that particular service. But we certainly let the customer tailor how much of that service that they may or may not want. The idea of folks having an idea of what's going to happen, I think that's good. I think that's really good. But I don't think they should know every single thing that's going to happen because we don't get a clear picture, or as clear a picture as we possibly could as to where the potential challenges might be.
I participated in a FEMA-graded exercise for the nuclear power plant in Orange County, and it was amazing when they called the exercise meltdown of the plant, of how real it felt when you're able to get into the role of the emergency manager instead of being the guy giving out the injects and whatnot. It was just amazing that you can actually get into that and actually feel and work it, So that's the experience that I had with that. What are some of the challenges that you guys have come across with extra training exercises throughout the country?
The answer to that question and more when we return from our break.
The modern emergency manager wears a lot of hats, so how do you also fit in the needs of your exercise program? It is a matter of time, and how much is your time worth? A lot. TTX Vault is the answer to getting some of that time back. We offer pre-assembled tabletops, drills, and functional exercises spanning NIMS, hospitals and healthcare, special operations, and more, all coming from the archives of the Blue Cell. Get a jumpstart on the exercise process and visit us today at www.ttxvault.com.
Emergencies happen, whether they're related to medical emergencies, threats of physical violence, weather-related, or other. One of the most difficult things during an emergency is to find help and quickly and efficiently communicate with all parties, regardless of whether you're an administrator, law enforcement, or the end user. With Titan HST, we help to store time by creating high-tech yet simple-to-use mobile-based applications that connect you with the people who can help you. At Titan HST, we believe in the power of people.
Hi, this is Todd DeVoe from EM Weekly. If your company is in the emergency management and response space, EM Weekly is a place for you to advertise. Each week we bring in experts in emergency management, response, and leadership from around the world, and they're here to share their best practices. Our listeners are eager to learn about new products and ideas, so this is the space for you. For more information, please contact Brian at emweekly.com.
Welcome back from that short break, and let's continue on. What are some of the challenges that you guys have come across with extra training exercises throughout the country?
Well, the biggest one that I hear, and I hear it consistently, and it really does segue into our new product line, it is having the time to deal with all the things that we now have emergency managers dealing with. And so whether it's the training aspect or even setting up training, doing an exercise, some of the other things that go along with preparedness, and then certainly if you've had a disaster, you may be dealing with the aftermath of that ongoing. We created TTX Vault to really give some tools and some speed or some time back to emergency managers. It developed internally as conversations with my staff and with the amount of work that we were doing. And we had, disks and hard drives full of information. And when we acquired Command School, we got a whole ton of information going back into the 1990s. We really started to pursue the idea of creating canned exercises, in this case, tabletops to start with, that have all of those essential elements put together. Subsequently, we have another course that we do call Advanced Planning Concepts that's actually in the DHS state and federal catalog. We had created a fake website just for that course called Chelsea County USA. And so we brought together the concepts of you've got a canned tabletop on a specific topic. You still have to probably go in and edit it. You may want to edit it, significantly, or you could just use the active shooter, let's say, as an example, that's set in our Chelsea County online environment. We've now packaged that so that you get both of those at a price that I would say is probably hard to believe when you really think about how much time it takes to make sure all of the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed to get a solid MEP-approved, HSEEP consistent exercise and get it out to your folks. Mm-hmm. The other thing that happens consequently was that the folks in the hospital realm started to have some of their own requirements and some of the other like long-term care facilities, that type of thing. A lot of your listeners will be probably very familiar with that call that comes from, the long-term care facility that says, I've got to do an exercise. In fact, I've got to do two, a full scale and a tabletop, and I've got to do it this fiscal year. Right. And of course they turn to the emergency manager, right? To get that assistance. What we've done in the vault is we've created a whole package just for that discipline. And once we got rolling with that, we decided to put a whole bunch more available on our website. We've got about 65 exercises canned on TTX Vault as of today.
Man, that's awesome, actually, because, you're always looking for good quality exercise ideas and resources that go along with them as well. So speaking of that, what resources do you get? So if I decided today I'm going to buy, we'll just stay with the active shooter. I'm going to buy the active shooter training exercise through the Vault. What do I get with that?
We are literally sending out a disc still, and we're finding that still works. With a single tabletop, you get about 400 files. So just on the exercise side of it, you get a situation manual that has a scenario in it. You get some identified core capabilities, about 4 of them, an exercise evaluation guide for each of those identified core capabilities, a improvement plan template, a PowerPoint comes along with that, and you have 2 versions of that. Over the years, we also have collected ICS forms and ideas and checklists, and so we give you a whole folder of that information. And then in the event that you want to use our Chelsea County USA environment, which comes along with that package, we have all of the plans for that fake county. So there's about 18 plans, a set of maps. It's literally Arapahoe County, Colorado, where we're based. We've changed some of the names, and we have a full resource list there. Those are FEMA-type resources. So if you are picking out a character from our Chelsea County environment, and it's a leader on an engine, we have the 3 additional names. So you can do a resource management level game. Everything that would come with a Type 1 or Type 2 engine, that's the number of personnel that you get. In addition to, of course, fire, we have law enforcement resources, public works resources. We have our hospital resources, about 700 characters alone in just the Chelsea County piece of the environment. We understand that folks may want to use their own jurisdiction, but we have a number of customers that actually like to rerun the scenario as if they've gone somewhere else, which is probably reality, right? With the disaster year that we had, there were folks going all over the world working on disasters. So through EMAC or incident management teams, certainly not immune that we may be leaving our jurisdiction. And that's always a great practice opportunity to see how you do the exercise if you were somewhere else. So all of that comes on the single scenario. We've packaged those up into 5 scenario packages. So with a package of 5, obviously you get 5 versions of that on 5 different topics.
One of the things that I've struggled with before is coming up with all the pieces. If you can start there, that's going to save you so much time and energy into putting the exercise on. And I think it's a quality thing that you guys can do for those jurisdictions.
That's literally what we've kind of said it's become our unofficial motto on the site. What is your time worth as an emergency manager? What is your time worth? What else could you be working on if you weren't so tied up, maybe trying to put together an exercise? And we know that there's a lot of pressure to do, a lot of exercises, or if something has just happened, that's when you start to get maybe that pressure from your agency administrator. The other thing that we do is we certainly follow trends. So we do have some packages that are now available for churches and places of worship. We have a whole new series that's going to come out based on shopping centers and arenas. And that's really just grabbing things out of the headlines that are happening, because those are the calls that we're getting at our office and some of the things that folks are trying to address.
Back to the concept here of some of the challenges for emergency managers. If somebody wanted just to use you guys for ideas and for maybe not a full exercise, but like an exercise support, how does that work?
That's pretty simple. We just basically contract that. You call our office, and I can assign one of my MEPs to talk to you about it. Or a lot of times I'm taking those calls directly, because we are going to be customizing that. In that case, it's really about having enough people, right, to run the exercise. So a typical support package would include us bringing in accountability folks so that we can keep track of everybody that's there. We do have the ability to bring in moulage artists if that's part of the exercise, and then separate evaluators and controllers to play those roles. We do have a tremendous amount of equipment that we've just accumulated over the years, so we can go everywhere from bringing in phone systems if needed, certainly radios and radio caches if needed, vests if folks need vests, whether that's on the exercise side or just as the role that they're playing. So the idea behind that support package is really to give you the horsepower and the manpower to effectively conduct an exercise. And that's probably at the drill, functional, and full-scale level that we're talking. But then it does free up folks to participate or to play their role or to be a coach or to sit with the agency administrator and answer questions, because all those things, can become important to the emergency manager, who's probably honcho in the whole thing at some level.
Right. What is like the frequently asked question that you guys get from people who are looking to contract?
Well, it probably starts with price, right? That would be the most frequent. That's usually where we start. But outside of price, and just to touch on price for a second, we use kind of a volume discount concept, or we kind of try to push our price down as far as we can because we just do so much work and so much volume. But outside of price, the biggest concern and the biggest question that I would consistently hear from emergency managers would really be centered around what is going to be kind of the outcome of the exercise, and really trying to zero in on what is going to be that end state. I'm trying to ask what they think it is, but many times they're asking me what I think it might be or should be, because some of the anxiety and concern I think that a lot of folks have, whether it's an emergency manager or even some of the other disciplines, is how well are they going to do? And so that really leads to what is the outcome that you're really looking for? What is really the goal of the exercise? And believe it or not, as much as I'm asking my customers, I think sometimes they're eliciting that information from me and what has gone on in other places. And it's just been interesting to kind of watch that evolution of how that becomes a pretty pertinent question after the pricing.
So do you recommend emergency managing team for whatever jurisdiction to sit down and kind of brainstorm of what they want to see being tested before they contact you, or is that something that you work out with them? Because if that seems to be one of those questions, I wonder if there's a way to get more, I don't know, before you make that decision to, me when I say you, talking about the emergency manager, of going into an exercise, maybe that should be something they think out first, or is that something that you can really help them out with?
Usually they've had some conversations and they have some idea, because we may not even be in a contract situation yet. So at that point, it's a consulting job, right? And we're really just trying to share whatever we can to get the customer to where they really understand what it is they're asking us to do, and what, that we're kind of managing those expectations, and that they would understand, have a really good idea of where they want the thing to head. I would say that active shooter exercises, which are by far the biggest call that we get, we really have to root through what is it that we're doing. Are we doing an exercise, or are we doing an exhibition? And there's a difference between the two. And so that's a frank conversation that we try to have, and we have it up front, and try to make sure that is it really something where we're trying to look at and improve plans and procedures and that type of thing, or is it because something happened on TV and the mayor or the county commission has said, you're going to do an exercise this year and we want to watch? So that is the trickiest piece of it, and that would be the topic that obviously right now we see that as a challenge. But in some of the other traditional exercise too, we could see that as a potential issue. Or if folks have had a bad experience previously with their previous exercise, sometimes we're trying to overcome that, and it's a managing expectations type thing that we're trying to do.
I've been involved in a few exercises where the guys in the field feel they get nothing out of it. And I know it tends to be that we're testing the EOC a lot, and we're testing the command staff, but the line guys don't seem to get much out of that exercise. What do you do to alleviate that the issue with the line guys?
I think a lot of times that's potentially a design challenge. And so if we're doing complex exercise design and we're trying to link, various levels of what people are going to do, generally what we would do is really design an exercise within the exercise and deal with it just like an incident within an incident. So managerially and from an objectives perspective, we're kind of breaking that into 2 pieces or 3 pieces and then trying to connect it. I know as a former SWAT officer what that used to feel like, to be called to the big exercise and then sit for 8 hours. That's a really good way to get SWAT guys upset. So you have to really look at it from that design perspective and try to fit activities together that are not only realistic, but it's so that those folks get something out of it, because they're just not going to want to come back if that isn't accomplished. And so I think there's ways to get creative with that and kind of get down into almost the drill mode with some of those kind of specific disciplines. And then part of it is maybe they aren't part of the exercise all day long, that they come in and do their piece. You do a hot wash with them, get their paperwork and cut them loose, opposed to trying to keep them busy for 6 or 8 or 10 hours, which is very, very difficult for tactical elements that are out there.
Right. It's going to be this is a tough question for you because I know that they're all probably pretty special to you, but what's your favorite exercise to administer?
Probably a functional exercise. With functional opposed to, with full scale, there's a lot of stress and we're spending a lot of money and there's a lot that goes into it. And drills are fun. There's no question. But at the functional exercise level, we get to really find out what those decision-making and leadership pieces look like without necessarily moving anything out in the field. And so we are finding that we can get very, very creative at that level, and our experience that we bring in helps in that creativity. But we can certainly get things moving and moving in directions or even change direction in functional exercise. I think it's much easier to do that at the functional exercise level. And that's the one that I just really have the most fun with.
Have you ever had to do like a timeout restart on any of your exercises that you've done where just people are just so far off the rails that they're not getting anything out of it?
Absolutely. And it doesn't happen very often. And it's pretty apparent when that needs to happen and you need to do a restart. And you can't make that decision very lightly. I think that's a call that has to be made in real time. But I certainly have seen it happen, and I think it is better to do that when needed than to just kind of let it play out. It's kind of like a scrimmage in sports that just isn't going well. Mm-hmm. The coach generally is not going to just let it go terribly for 3 hours and then, okay, let's just forget about it or let's talk about it tomorrow. Usually we stop and we talk about it, make adjustments, and I think that's important in exercise when needed. I wouldn't say it happens a lot, but we certainly have experienced it.
How can somebody get in touch with you if they're interested? How can they find you?
So the best way to find us is at our website, which is www.thebluecell.com. And that's TheBlueCell.com. And we've really designed that as what we're calling a portal because it opens up the world of Blue Cell and all the things that we have going on. The most prominent things certainly are links to TTXVault.com, which is a separate site. And then all of our social media runs right across the top. So we are on Facebook and Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+. We have a YouTube page. We have a Pinterest page. We don't do much with that at the moment, but I'm trying to change that. We do stay involved in social media, and we try to put as much stuff out there. But also on our website, you're going to find resources that are free to download. So we try to share as much of that as possible through thebluecell.com. The other question that I get, and I hope it's okay to share this.
Sure.
Where do we come up with the name, the Blue Cell?
That was going to be my next question.
Was that going to be your next question?
Yeah.
Great Todd's think alike. We were teaching a 300 class, and we were down, I think, at Fort Carson, which is a big Army post in Colorado. And we had the garrison commander actually in the class. And the garrison commander hadn't really said a word all week. And towards the end of the week, and this was before we had started the formal company as we know it today, the garrison commander said, hey, if you ever start a company, you should call it the Blue Cell, because in the military, we kind of use the color blue related to planning and those types of functions. And then we kind of operate in cells. And so it was probably a year later that we actually made that step and started the bluecell.com. And I actually got a Christmas card that year from that garrison commander who had moved on to another post, and he wrote, "I see that you took my advice. Please send all revenues related to that name to this address in Germany." And that's how we got the name the Blue Cell. And I wish I could take credit for it, but it sure has served us well for the 8 years that we've been using it.
That's an awesome story, actually. That is a great story. Okay, so here comes the toughest question of the day for you. What book or publication do you recommend to somebody who is in emergency management and leadership, and specifically, say, if you're thinking about exercises and stuff like that, what book do you recommend them to read?
Well, there's two. Can I give you two?
Sure. You can give me as many as you want.
Okay. So the Powell Principles, the 24 Lessons from Colin Powell, that is just a quick, great read. And we use that, the principles themselves, to try to run the company. And we certainly talk about it quite a bit in our leadership and decision-making workshop that we've created. So I'm certainly married to the idea of that book. The other one is a book called Managing the Unexpected, which is actually a business book by Carl Week and Kathleen Sutcliffe. And it is a really good critical thinking book. And I think that is one of the essential elements that every emergency manager needs to have. As a consequence manager and as a planner, your ability to critically think becomes important. And so in this book, Managing the Unexpected, it goes through some great examples and really talks about how do we think about these things and how do we approach things to really get to a point where maybe something's happening that we weren't necessarily think was going to happen, but we still have to manage it. I think that's emergency management in a nutshell.
Oh, yeah,
right?
for sure.
Kind of what happens on a regular basis. So those would be my two go-to recommendations in terms of books to read.
Well, Todd, thank you so much for being here with me today. Thank you for having faith in EM Weekly and joining the family. I really appreciate having you here in both aspects.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, and maybe we'll talk to you again sometime.